I'm Sarah Brennan, 33, and I was about to lose my son in a Stanford courtroom because my ex-husband's lawyer had rehearsed one sentence until it sang. She's broke. She can't even afford a home or decent food and clothes for the kids. Why should she get them? Judge Vaughn nodded at that. Slow, considered, the way judges nod when they believe they've heard enough. I sat at the defense table with my hands flat on the wood and my breath locked behind my teeth. I didn't cry. My grandmother Ruth raised me on a single instruction. Tell the truth slow. And I was trying. But none of them knew what was coming. Not the judge, not Daniel, not his lawyer, and not even me. Until my 7-year-old stood up from the gallery bench with a folded paper in his backpack that would turn Daniel Pierce white before the hearing ended. Welcome back to Revenge Narrative Stories. We bring you grounded family drama stories about quiet women, public reckonings, and the moment the room finally turns. If you've ever been told you weren't enough, sit with me for the next hour. Drop a comment and be sure to subscribe. A year before that courtroom, I was still married, still signing things. Daniel Pierce ran Pierce Holdings out of a converted barn in Greenwich, 4 lakefront rentals, 1 commercial strip on Mason Avenue, and a smile that made bankers return his calls on Saturday mornings. I'd been a paralegal at Reeves and Aldridge Estate Planning for 6 years, 22-minute commute, reliable paycheck, steady. Daniel called my job cute once at a dinner party, and I let it pass because Eli was asleep upstairs and I was tired and some fights just aren't worth the dishes they break. Eli was 6 then. His art teacher sent home a note. Very thoughtful compositions. He draws what he sees, not what you'd expect. I pinned it to the fridge next to the grocery list and a crayon calendar I'd made him so he could count the days until summer camp. That was our kitchen. Magnets, lists, 1 chipped mug that said World's Okayest Paralegal. Then in October, I found a loan agreement in our filing cabinet, $180,000 signed by Daniel to a vendor named Greg Patton. I knew Greg Patton. He was Daniel's golf buddy. He installed no tiles. He poured no concrete. He was a loan to a friend dressed up as a business expense. And I recognized the shape because I'd spent 6 years filing trust documents for men who did exactly this. I asked Daniel about it at dinner. He set down his fork. You don't understand real estate, honey. I signed where he pointed. 6 years of signing where he pointed. I told myself that was love. Turns out it was filing. By January, our 2 lives had separated into different zip codes. I rented a 2nd-floor unit in a 4-unit building off Traer Boulevard. 2 bedrooms, radiator heat, a window over the parking lot that Eli said looked like a checkerboard when it rained. The fridge got the same treatment as the old one. Custody schedule drawn in marker on a laminated card. Stickered chart underneath. Gold stars for every night Eli brushed without being asked. That schedule was my anchor. Every Tuesday and Thursday, a gold star. Every other weekend, a blue dot. I stared at it the way sailors stare at a compass. Not because it told me where to go, but because it proved I was somewhere. Daniel's life looked different. Carla, his stepmother, the one who raised him after his real mother left, posted photos from the Greenwich Foundation Gala on her Facebook. Daniel in a navy suit. The lake house lit with lanterns. A caterer carrying a tray of something I couldn't pronounce. Eli told me his dad's house had a hot tub now. I said, that's nice, buddy. I didn't look it up. What I looked up instead was a phrase Eli repeated from one of Daniel's phone calls. Pierce Holdings 2. I Googled it that night after Eli fell asleep. No state registration. No website. No filings I could find on the Connecticut Secretary of State portal, just a name Daniel had said out loud and an LLC that didn't seem to exist on paper. I bookmarked the search page, closed my laptop, and went to bed. Some questions are better asked slowly. In March, Daniel hired Mark Hollis, Hollis Greer Family Law, Greenwich, the kind of firm where the waiting room had a Keurig and a view of Long Island Sound. Our first procedural conference was at the Stanford Courthouse. Room 2A, fluorescent lights, and plastic chairs. Caleb Reeves came with me. Caleb was my boss, the founder of Reeves and Aldridge, 58 years old and built like a man who'd rather read a brief than eat lunch. He'd offered to represent me pro bono the week I told him about the divorce. I'd said no 3 times. He'd said, Sarah, you have a team. Use it. The 4th time I said yes. Hollis shook Caleb's hand in the hallway. We won't make this hard, he said. He smiled the way people smile when they already know the seating chart. In the conference room, Hollis turned to me. Miss Brennan, just so we can get a clear picture, how much do you net per month, including any child support you currently receive? Caleb put his hand on my arm. We'll provide financials through proper channels, Mark. Hollis nodded. He didn't need my answer. I'd seen him glance at a folder. My bank statements were already in it. I don't know how he got them. I know that after the meeting, Caleb walked me to the elevator and said one sentence that sat in my stomach for the next 5 months. Sarah, they're going to make this about money, not about Eli. About money. He was right. He was always right about the things I didn't want to hear. That Thursday night, Eli sat at the kitchen table with a worksheet about weather patterns while I made spaghetti. His maple yellow rain jacket was draped over the back of his chair, the one with the toggle zipper he liked because it sounded like a tiny motorcycle. He looked up from his paper. Mom, what if someone says something that isn't true at school? I turned down the burner. Like what? Like if Tyler says I didn't bring the markers when I did? I sat across from him. You don't have to fix it fast, honey. Tell the truth slow. Look at your shoes. Breathe twice. Then say what's real. He thought about it. What if nobody believes me? Then you still told the truth and you'll sleep fine. He went back to his worksheet. I went back to the spaghetti. Tell the truth slow. My grandmother Ruth used to say it when I came home from school, red-faced about some kid who'd lied about me in the cafeteria. Ruth never raised her voice. She raised her standards. She'd been a bookkeeper for 41 years at a plumbing supply company in Bridgeport, and she believed that accuracy was a form of love. She'd passed away 4 years earlier and left me $86,000 in a separate account I'd never told Daniel about. Not because I was hiding it, but because he never asked, and because Ruth had taught me that some money is a safety net, not a conversation topic. I stirred the pot. Eli hummed something tuneless. The rain jacket hung behind him like a small yellow flag, and the apartment was warm, and the truth, for now, was slow enough. Carla Pierce showed up on a Saturday without calling. She stood in my doorway with 2 LL Bean bags and a smile that could cut glass. I brought Eli a few things for winter. You know how he runs cold. Eli was at a friend's house. I let her in because refusing Carla felt like refusing weather. It was going to happen either way. Eli came out of his room with a math worksheet. Mom, can you check number 7? I checked number 7. It was correct. I told him so and he went back to his room. I called Caleb back late that night. They sent someone into my building. Yes. To take pictures of a light bulb. Yes. What do? You don't panic. You document everything on your end. Every repair request, every maintenance receipt, every email to your landlord, and we file a response by Friday. I hung up. The stairwell light was on. I checked it myself, standing in the hallway in socks. It was on. Saturday morning, Caleb's office. He had his sleeves rolled to the elbow and a yellow legal pad, a different kind than Carla's, though the color still made my stomach turn. Here's where we are, he said. They're playing the poverty card. Every motion, every deposition question, every photograph. It all points to one argument. You can't afford to raise Eli. We need to flip the camera. What does Daniel actually make? I told him what I knew. The lake house rentals, the commercial strip, the $180,000 loan to Greg Patton that wasn't a real loan. I told him about Pierce Holdings too, the name Eli had repeated from a phone call, the LLC I couldn't find on the Secretary of State portal. Caleb wrote it down. I know a forensic accountant, he said. Diana Holcomb. She's handled high-asset divorces in Fairfield County for 15 years. If there's a hidden entity, she'll find the trail. How long? 8 to 10 weeks. Subpoenas. Bank traces. LLC filings. The hearing is in 5 weeks. He looked at me over his reading glasses. Then we prepare the case we have and hope something surfaces before then. He paused. Wealthy men don't get caught because they're sloppy, Sarah. They get caught because someone insists slowly. I drove home and parked in the lot behind my building. The stairwell light was still on. I climbed to the 2nd floor, let myself in, and looked at the custody schedule on the fridge. Tuesday, Gold Star. Thursday, Gold Star. Eli had added a small drawing of a sun in the corner. I didn't know what that meant. I didn't ask. Some things kids draw are just for them. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling fan and remembered something from the old house. In the study closet, behind a shelf of tax binders, Daniel kept a small floor safe. He'd shown it to me once early in the marriage when we were still showing each other things. Tax paperwork, he'd said. Boring stuff. Don't worry about it. There was a manila envelope inside sealed with packing tape. I'd touched it once while looking for our passports. It was thick, maybe 40 pages. I put it back. He'd never mentioned it again. I drove home and parked in the lot behind my building. The stairwell light was still on. I climbed to the second floor, let myself in, and looked at the custody schedule on the fridge. Tuesday, gold star. Thursday, gold star. Eli had added a small drawing of a sun in the corner. I didn't know what that meant. I didn't ask. Some things kids draw are just for them. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling fan and remembered something from the old house. In the study closet, behind a shelf of tax binders, Daniel kept a small floor safe. He'd shown it to me once early in the marriage when we were still showing each other things. Tax paperwork, he'd said. Boring stuff. Don't worry about it. There was a manila envelope inside sealed with packing tape. I'd touched it once while looking for our passports. It was thick, maybe 40 pages. I put it back. He'd never mentioned it again. Lying in my apartment, I ran the math. When Daniel moved out of our house and into the new place on Ridgewood Lane, he'd hired movers, 2 trucks. He'd taken the safe. I knew because Eli had told me. Dad's new house has a room behind the bookshelf. The safe is in there. At the time, I nodded and changed the subject, because you don't interrogate your 7-year-old about his father's floor safe. But the shape of it stayed. A sealed envelope, a phantom LLC, a lawyer who opened with "she's broke" like it was a thesis statement. I got up, made tea, and sat at the kitchen table. My blue thermos was on the counter, Ruth's sticker peeling at the corner. I didn't call Caleb. I didn't write anything down. I just sat with the shape of something I couldn't prove yet and let it settle. Tell the truth slow, Ruth used to say, even when the truth is still assembling. Eli came home from his weekend at Daniel's on Sunday afternoon. He had paint on his sleeve and a new Pokemon card he'd traded for at school before drop-off. We made pasta together. His job was stirring. Mine was not burning. Halfway through dinner, he said it casually, the way kids mention earthquakes. Dad's safe is behind the bookshelf. The bookshelf moves. I kept stirring the sauce. Oh yeah. He showed me once. He said it's where important things live. I set down the spoon. What kind of important things? Papers, a blue folder, a card that's black and shiny. He took another bite. I dropped my Charizard card behind the bookshelf last time. I had to crawl behind it. The safe was open a little. I looked at my son. His face was pasta sauce and unconcerned. He had no idea what he'd just said. Every cell in me wanted to ask what was on those papers. Could you read any of it? Did you see a name? I didn't ask. I'd read enough trial transcripts at Reeves and Aldridge to know what happens when a parent turns a child into a witness on their behalf. Judges see it. Evaluators see it. And kids feel it, even when they can't name it. So I said, that's a tricky spot for a Charizard card. He laughed. I got it back though. Good. We finished dinner. He showed me the Charizard. I told him it looked powerful. He said it was. Then he brushed his teeth without being asked, and I put a gold star on the fridge chart, and neither of us mentioned the safe again. But I heard it. I heard every word. Jenna's deposition was on a Wednesday. I sat in Caleb's office on a video link and watched my sister testify under oath that I was scattered, exhausted, and possibly depressed. She forgets things, Jenna said. She was wearing the blouse I'd bought her for her birthday 2 summers ago at our family cabin. She forgot Eli's allergy meds. I had to drive 40 minutes to a pharmacy. I held my blue thermos in my lap, the dented one with Ruth's sticker. I didn't drink from it. I just held it. Because here's what Jenna left out. She had been at that cabin. She'd been responsible for packing the kids' bag. She'd volunteered. And when the EpiPen wasn't in the bag, she'd driven to the pharmacy and come back a hero while I apologized for something that wasn't mine. Now she was telling that story under oath, and telling it without an owner. Last summer, as if weather had done it. She forgot, as if I'd packed the bag. Hollis asked her whether she believed I could provide a stable home. Jenna paused. I could see her jaw working the way it did when she was about to say something she'd rehearsed. I love my sister, she said. But I think the kids deserve consistency. There was that plural again. Kids, as if Eli were a category. After the video ended, Caleb turned off the screen and looked at me. Are you all right? I set the thermos on his desk. The Brennan sticker was curling at the edges. She's lying, I said. She's not lying. She's selecting, Caleb said. That's worse. The following Tuesday morning, my phone buzzed with a text thread I'd never been added to. The header read Pierce family with a red heart emoji. The first visible message was from Mike, Jenna's husband. Pierce family, quick reminder for tomorrow's deposition questions. My name hadn't been in this group before. Mike had added me by accident. His fingers, his guilt, his contact list. I didn't know which. And in that moment I didn't care, because I was already scrolling up. The thread was 4 months old. I read it standing in my kitchen with the coffee maker dripping behind me. Carla 6 weeks back. Daniel, Hollis says open with broke. Vaughn responds to provider language. We've been over this. Jenna 4 weeks back. Just told her I'm worried. She bought it. Followed by a laughing crying emoji. Daniel 2 weeks back. Once the LLC dissolves in March, none of this matters. She gets supervised at best. Carla 1 week back. Stay calm in court. The teacher's daughter doesn't have the spine for a fight. 187 messages. 4 months of coordination. My sister, my ex-husband, his stepmother, her husband, all in a group chat that read like a production schedule for the worst play I'd ever been cast in. I did not reply. I did not leave the group. I opened my email, created a new folder, and screenshotted every message. All 187, with timestamps and sender names visible. I emailed them to Caleb's secure client folder. Then I emailed a copy to my own backup address. Then I removed myself from the group quietly, the way you close a door when someone is sleeping and you don't want them to know you were there. Mike never texted again. The coffee maker beeped. I poured myself a cup into Ruth's thermos and screwed the lid on tight. I didn't tell Caleb about the screenshots. Not right away. A different person might have called him that morning, forwarded the thread, and filed an emergency motion by lunch. But I'd spent 6 years at an estate planning firm watching people play evidence too early. A trust contest blown because someone submitted a draft instead of the final. A will challenge lost because the family showed their cards at mediation and gave the other side 3 weeks to build a counter-narrative. I knew what Hollis would do if I surfaced the group chat. He'd file a motion to suppress, improper access, unauthorized addition to a private thread, fruit of the poisoned contact list. He'd drag the admissibility fight for weeks while Daniel's team adjusted. So I held it. I kept the folder locked and I kept my mouth steady, and I let them keep thinking I was the teacher's daughter without a spine. There was something else in those messages. Daniel's line, once the LLC dissolves in March, none of this matters. March was 5 weeks away. If Pierce Holdings 2 dissolved in March and the retained earnings were distributed to Daniel as personal income, he could be sitting on something north of $2 million that no financial disclosure had ever mentioned. Diana's rough estimate, not a certainty, but enough to explain why Hollis was so confident. That meant the safe might hold exactly what I thought it held. Paperwork for the dissolution plan. But I couldn't get it. I couldn't ask Eli to get it. I couldn't send Caleb to request it without tipping off Hollis. I could only wait, prepare the case I had, and trust that the truth, all of it, even the parts still folded in a safe behind a bookshelf, would move at its own speed. You don't fire a weapon on a random morning. You wait for the room where the truth needs it most. Eli was quiet at dinner the following Sunday. Not sad quiet, thinking quiet. The kind of quiet where a 7-year-old pushes his carrots around the plate and stares at the wall behind your shoulder. I didn't push. I learned from Ruth that silence has its own clock, and if you interrupt it, you get a shorter version of whatever was coming. We ate. I cleared the plates. He helped dry a fork. Then, standing on the step stool at the counter, he said, "Grandma Carla made me practice answers." I set down the sponge. "Practice answers for what, honey?" For if a lady asks me about home, like where I sleep better and where the food is better. His voice was careful, the way it got when he was repeating something an adult had told him to memorize. She said I should say I sleep good at Dad's and that here it's loud sometimes. I dried my hands, sat on the floor next to the step stool so we were eye to eye. Is it loud here? He looked at me like I'd asked whether the sky was up. No. Okay. But here isn't loud. He said it again louder, as if the floor needed to hear it too. I wanted to call Daniel. I wanted to call Carla. I wanted to call Caleb and file something with the word coaching in the header. But I looked at Eli and I saw a kid who had just told me something honest. And the last thing he needed was for that honesty to become a legal document before bedtime. Thank you for telling me, I said. You're a good reporter. He smiled, small, reliable. Then he went to brush his teeth. Gold star. The next morning, I sat with Eli at breakfast. He ate cereal. I ate toast. The maple yellow rain jacket was on the hook by the door, the toggle zipper catching the light from the kitchen window. Eli, I said, when the lady comes, the one Grandma Carla mentioned, you can answer however feels true to you. He looked up, milk on his chin. You don't have to pick a side. You don't have to make anyone happy. Not Dad, not Grandma Carla, not me. What if she asks where I like better? Then you tell her what's true for you. And if you don't know, you say you don't know. That's a real answer too. He nodded. I reached across the table and wiped the milk off his chin with my thumb. Tell the truth slow, I said. Even if a lady is asking. Even if it's me asking. Tell the truth slow and trust yourself. He said, okay. Then he said, can I have more cereal? And the morning went back to being a morning. But I sat there for an extra minute after he left the table. Carla had been a divorce attorney for 30 years. She'd coached witnesses for a living, not just Daniel, but defendants, plaintiffs, expert witnesses whose fees ran $500 an hour. And now she was coaching a 7-year-old to say, here it's loud sometimes. I thought about the yellow legal pad in her tote bag. I thought about the group chat where she'd written, the teacher's daughter doesn't have the spine for a fight. I thought about how wrong she was. And I poured myself another cup of coffee and went to work. Diana Holcomb had gray hair pulled back with a pencil and a handshake that meant business. We met at Caleb's office on a Thursday afternoon. She'd reviewed the documents I could provide, Daniel's public filings, the loan agreement to Greg Patton. The search results showing Pierce Holdings 2 didn't appear in state records. The pattern is consistent, she said. She spoke the way accountants speak when they're trying not to use the word fraud before they have subpoena power. He's likely retaining earnings inside the LLC and paying himself a nominal salary, $48,000, maybe $50,000. On paper, he looks middle income. In practice, the entity holds the rest. How much? Based on the rental portfolio alone, conservatively $2.4 million over 3 years. Caleb leaned back. Can you confirm before the hearing? Diana shook her head. I need bank records, LLC operating agreements, tax returns for the entity. That's a subpoena, 8 to 10 weeks minimum. The hearing is in 9 days. Diana looked at me. I'm sorry. I can start the process, but I can't finish it in time. I nodded. 9 days. I had screenshots I couldn't use yet without risking suppression. I had a forensic accountant who needed 8 weeks I didn't have. And somewhere in a house on Ridgewood Lane, behind a bookshelf that moved, a floor safe held papers I'd never read and couldn't ask my son to bring me. Caleb walked me to the door. We prepare what we have, he said, and we present Sarah Brennan as she is, steady, employed, present. I drove home with the thermos and the cup holder. Ruth's sticker had curled another millimeter. I didn't peel it off. I had screenshots no one knew I had. I had a son who said, here isn't loud. And I had 9 days before a judge would decide whether I was enough. If you've ever held a truth you couldn't use yet, you know how heavy a morning gets. Stay with me. The next days are the ones the whole story turns on. 7 days before the hearing, Hollis filed something new. A Guardian ad litem report. I read the name of the appointed jail, Patricia Waverly, retired family therapist, Fairfield County, and Caleb recognized it before I did. She's Carla's former colleague. They served on the same Bar Association mediation panel in the 90s. The report was 4 pages. Waverly had visited my apartment on a Saturday when Eli was at Daniel's. I'd been notified 48 hours before, an email from Hollis's office, not from Waverly herself, timed so I'd have just enough notice to comply and not enough to prepare. She'd spoken with the building superintendent, noted the narrow stairwell, the parking lot view from Eli's bedroom window, and the square footage, 910 square feet, which she described as limited for a growing child's needs. She also noted that the refrigerator contained basic staples and that the living room doubled as a workspace. Caleb set the report down. They're stacking the deck so high they think you can't see the table. I read the report twice. Every sentence was technically true. My apartment was small. My fridge did have basic staples. My living room did double as a workspace. But the way Waverly wrote it, each fact sounded like a failure. Square footage became neglect. Groceries became inadequacy. A mother working from home became instability. Can we challenge the appointment? I asked. We can raise the conflict of interest at the hearing, but the report is already filed. I drove home that night and stood in my kitchen. 910 square feet. Eli's drawings on the fridge, the custody schedule with its gold stars, the sticker chart, the chipped mug. I looked at all of it and thought, this is not limited. This is a life. It's just not the kind of life that looks good in a 4-page report. 5 nights before the hearing, bedtime. Eli was in pajamas, teeth brushed, blanket pulled to his chin. His maple yellow rain jacket was draped over the desk chair by the window. He'd worn it to school that day, even though it hadn't rained, because he said it made him feel ready. I sat on the edge of his bed. He looked at the ceiling. Mom. Yeah, buddy. Do you keep important things in a safe? My pulse didn't spike. It slowed. The way a river slows before a bend when it knows what's coming. We don't have a safe, honey. Why? Dad's safe has papers with his name on them. I saw one once. Last time I was there. I was crawling behind the bookshelf to get my Charizard card, and the safe was open a little bit. I didn't move. I read the top of one paper. He said it said Pierce Holdings 2 and plan and then a word I didn't know, like dissolution, and Dad's name was on it 3 times. I breathed twice the way I taught him to breathe before saying what's real. Did you take anything, honey? No, but I remember where it was. He said this the way he said everything, like a weather report. Clear, unhurried, factual. A 7-year-old who draws what he sees, not what you'd expect. I pulled his blanket up. Thank you for telling me. Is it important? I don't know yet, I said. Which was a lie. Can I bring it? Next time I go to Dad's. That's your decision, honey. Not mine. I kissed his forehead, turned off the lamp, and stood in the hallway with my hand on the wall, not breathing, not crying, just standing very still while the building hummed around me. I didn't sleep. I lay in bed with the ceiling fan ticking above me, and I thought about what it would mean to ask him. He was 7. If I told him what to bring, he'd bring it. He'd walk into his father's house, open a safe he wasn't supposed to touch, take a document he couldn't read, and carry it across a custody line because his mother asked him to. And then for the rest of his life, he'd know. He'd know his mother used him. I'd rather lose. I said that to myself in the dark, and I meant it. I'd rather walk into that courtroom with nothing but my thermos and my budget spreadsheet in Caleb's steady voice and lose cleanly on the facts as they were than win with something my son carried because I couldn't carry it myself. In the morning, I made eggs. Eli came out in his pajamas. I poured him juice. We sat across from each other the way we always did, him eating, me watching him eat, both of us pretending mornings were just mornings. Eli, I said, if you ever want to show something to a grown-up who will listen, a teacher, a counselor, a judge, anyone, you can. You don't need anyone's permission. Not Dad's, not mine. He looked at me with his fork halfway to his mouth. Okay. Trust your own judgment. Tell the truth slow. Okay, Mom. He went back to his eggs. I went back to my coffee. And that was it. I didn't mention the safe. I didn't mention the paper. I gave him a principle, and I let him decide what to do with it. The same way Ruth had given it to me 30 years ago, standing in a kitchen that smelled like dish soap and certainty. The morning of the hearing, I woke before the alarm, showered, put on the navy blouse Caleb had told me looked professional, made coffee, poured it into the blue thermos. Ruth's sticker now curled at both corners, barely holding on, the way everything I owned seemed to be barely holding on that week. Eli was already awake. He dressed himself. The maple yellow rain jacket was zipped to his chin, even though the forecast said partly cloudy. His school backpack was on his shoulders, the one with the rocket patch he'd picked out at Target back in August. "Ready?" I asked. "Ready." We drove to Stamford Family Court in silence. I parked in the structure on Hoyt Street. Eli held my hand across the street. His backpack bounced against his back with each step. I didn't look at it. I didn't ask what was inside. On the kitchen fridge that morning, the custody schedule was still pinned up. Gold stars on Tuesday and Thursday, a blue on the coming weekend, and Eli's small son drawing in the corner that I still hadn't asked about. I looked at it while locking the door. The way you look at a compass one last time before you leave shore. We sat on the bench outside courtroom 3B. The hallway smelled like floor polish and anxiety. Caleb arrived with his briefcase and a nod. "How are you?" "Steady," I said. He looked at Eli. "How are you, young man?" Eli said, "Good." Maeve, Ruth's oldest friend, 71, retired librarian, arrived to sit with Eli during the hearing. She brought a book of crossword puzzles and a granola bar. Eli liked Maeve. Maeve liked silence. They were a good pair. Courtroom 3B. Wood-paneled walls. American flag in the corner. Judge Eileen Vaughn, 56. Glasses on a chain, a water glass she never touched. The court reporter's hands weighted over the stenotype like a pianist before the first note. Hollis stood. He buttoned his jacket. He didn't look at me. "Your Honor, my client is a stable provider. He maintains a home in the Ridgewood Lane neighborhood of Stamford. 4 bedrooms, a yard, proximity to Eli's school. He is financially secure, emotionally present, and ready to provide full-time custody." He turned slightly, not toward me, but toward the judge. His ex-wife is frankly not in the same position. She's broke. She can't even afford a home or decent food and clothes for the kids. Why should she get them? Kids, plural. We had 1 child. Hollis knew that. But kids sounds like a category of neglect, and a category is harder to defend than a name. The sentence landed the way a gavel lands. Once. Hard, final. Judge Vaughn nodded, the same slow nod I'd feared in life. Carla sat in the second row of the gallery, hands folded in her lap, pearl necklace resting against her collar. She touched it once, a small press of her index finger against the clasp, and looked straight ahead. Jenna sat 3 rows back next to Mike. Mike was staring at his shoes. Jenna was staring at me. I held my thermos under the table. The dented aluminum was cool against my palms. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I didn't react. He just told a fast lie with a slow delivery. And the room had believed him. But I'd been raised by a woman who said, "Tell the truth slow." And I knew, the way you know weather is coming before you feel the wind, that the room was about to find out which traveled further. Caleb called me to the stand. His voice was the same as always, low, precise, the voice of a man who believed preparation was its own form of prayer. "Miss Brennan, can you walk the court through your monthly budget?" I did. Rent $14.20, utilities $190, groceries $480, Eli's after-school art program $150, health insurance through my employer, car payment $218, savings contribution $300 a month into an account I'd held since before the marriage. "And your annual income?" $58,400. "Is that enough to provide Eli with a safe, stable home?" "Yes." Hollis cross-examined. "But you're not earning what Mr. Pierce earns, are you, Miss Brennan?" "No. I'm earning what I earn. It's enough. Your apartment is 910 square feet." "It is." "Eli doesn't have a yard. He has a park 3 blocks away. We walk there most evenings." "Miss Brennan, do you believe a child benefits from financial stability?" I looked at Hollis. "I believe a child benefits from honesty." Daniel smirked. Carla pressed her pearl necklace again, a second touch, barely visible, the way someone checks a lock they've already checked. Hollis sat down. Caleb didn't redirect. He'd told me he wouldn't. "Let the testimony breathe," he'd said. "Judges remember what sits in the air." I stepped down, walked back to my chair, sat next to Caleb. He didn't look at me. He didn't need to. I wasn't raising my son to be wealthy. I was raising him to know when something isn't true. And right now, Sitting in courtroom 3B with a thermos and a $58,000 salary, the truest thing in the room was me. Hollis rose for his closing. He rebut-toned his jacket. He placed both hands on the edge of the table and leaned forward the way men lean when they want the room to feel their weight. Your Honor, I'll keep this simple. The court has heard testimony. The court has reviewed the Guardian ad litem's report. The facts are plain. He turned slightly toward the gallery, toward Carla, toward Daniel, toward the version of the story they'd built together in a group chat I wasn't supposed to see. She's broke. She can't even afford a home or decent food and clothes for your son. The standard this court applies is the best interest of the child. And the answer, respectfully, is Daniel Pierce. He sat down. Daniel exhaled a small, satisfied exhale, the kind of breath you let out when the plane lands and you're in first class and the weather is fine. Judge Vaughn lifted her pen. She was about to speak. I could see it in her posture, the slight forward lean, the adjustment of her glasses, the opening of her mouth around a word that was probably going to be having considered. Caleb sat very still beside me. His hands were flat on the table. Mine were on my thermos. And somewhere behind me, in the third row of the gallery, sitting beside a 71-year-old retired librarian with a crossword book, a 7-year-old boy in a maple yellow rain jacket was already moving. I didn't see him stand. I heard the bench creak. I heard Maeve's quieto. And then I heard his voice, clear, small, carrying across the room the way only a child's voice can carry when it has something real to say. Mom, can I show the judge the letter I found in Dad's safe? The courtroom stopped. I mean that literally. The court reporter's hands froze mid-keystroke. Hollis's pen halted against his notepad. Judge Vaughn's mouth closed around the words she'd been about to say. Daniel turned in his chair slowly, the way you turn when you hear a sound you recognize but can't place. His face was already changing. Caleb put his hand on my arm. Not a warning. A brace. I looked at my son. He was standing between the gallery benches, his backpack still on his shoulders, his yellow jacket zipped to the collar, his eyes on me. He was waiting for permission. And I realized he hadn't asked me to let him. He'd asked if he could. There's a difference. One is obedience. The other is courtesy. I didn't nod. I didn't speak. I looked at Judge Vaughn. She was studying Eli the way I'd seen her study case files, carefully, without assumption. Young man, she said. Her voice was different now. Softer. Not condescending, respectful. The way adults speak when they realize a child has entered a room as a person, not a prop. Is this something you brought today on your own? Eli nodded. Yes, ma'am. Mom doesn't know what's in it. She told me to trust my own judgment. Hollis stood. Your Honor, this is highly irregular. A minor presenting unsolicited. Caleb stood too, quieter. Your Honor, a 7-year-old is offering to share something with the court. The court can determine relevance after receiving it. Judge Vaughn looked at Hollis, then at Caleb, then back at Eli. Approach, young man. Eli walked forward. His sneakers squeaked on the courtroom floor. He unzipped his backpack, the rocket patch catching the fluorescent light, and reached inside. He pulled out a single folded paper. It was slightly creased. He'd carried it in a backpack full of colored pencils and a granola bar wrapper and a spelling worksheet. He held it up to the judge with both hands, the way you hand someone a drawing you're proud of. Judge Vaughn took it. She unfolded it, and the room held its breath. Judge Vaughn read. The paper was a single page, white, laser-printed, with a handwritten signature at the bottom. I could see the header from where I sat, bold, uppercase, the kind of header lawyers put on documents they intend to be binding. The courtroom was so quiet I could hear the HVAC cycling above us. The court reporter's hands were still. Hollis had half risen from his chair and frozen there, one hand on the table, the other gripping his pen. Daniel was staring at the paper in the judge's hands the way a man stares at a locked door he thought he'd bolted. Judge Vaughn read to the end. She set the paper down. She took off her glasses. She looked at Daniel. Not at me. Not at Caleb. Not at Eli. At Daniel. Mr. Hollis, she said. Were you aware that your client maintains an LLC called Pierce Holdings II, currently retaining approximately $2.4 million in unreported earnings, with a planned dissolution scheduled for March of this year? Hollis's mouth opened. Your Honor, I would need to review. The memo is authored by one Anson Rowe, Esquire, addressed to your client. It details a proposed post-decree dissolution structure designed to shield marital income from equitable distribution. She picked up the paper again. It is dated November 14th. It is signed. She turned to Daniel. Mr. Pierce, does this memo reflect your current financial position? Daniel's tie was still knotted. His suit was still pressed. His hands were flat on the table the way Caleb's had been, but Caleb's had been still from discipline. Daniel's were still from paralysis. His face had lost 2 shades of color. Carla in the second row stopped blinking. Her hand was on her pearl necklace, but her fingers weren't moving. Jenna, 3 rows back, was looking at her shoes. Mike was looking at Jenna. Daniel spoke. Your Honor, that memo. It was a draft. A hypothetical. My attorney was exploring options. And it signed Mr. Pierce. The room was silent. The court reporter's keys hadn't moved since Daniel started talking, and the 7-year-old in the maple yellow jacket was standing by the bench, backpack open, hands at his sides, watching his father's face the way children watch weather, without judgment, just observation. I stood. I didn't smile. I didn't look at Daniel. I looked at Judge Vaughn and I spoke the way Ruth taught me to speak, clear, measured, without decoration. Your Honor, I want the record to reflect that I did not know what my son brought to court today. I did not ask him to bring it. I never instructed him about that safe or its contents. I told him, as I've told him since he was old enough to understand, to trust his own judgment about what to share and with whom. If the court needs to question that, I welcome the questioning. Judge Vaughn looked at me. It was the first time in the hearing she'd looked at me with something other than procedural attention. She'd been fair all morning, measured, professional, but now there was something behind her eyes that I can only describe as recognition. One woman looking at another and understanding what it costs to stand still while someone calls you broke. Miss Brennan, the court hears you. She turned to Hollis. Counsel, I'm marking this document for identification and ordering it held by the clerk pending authentication. I am setting an emergency evidentiary hearing within 14 days to determine admissibility and to receive forensic accounting testimony. I'm also ordering a full financial audit of Pierce Holdings, Pierce Holdings II, and all related entities. Mr. Pierce's counsel will facilitate production of all records by end of business Friday. She paused. In the interim, and given the serious questions this raises about the accuracy of Mr. Pierce's sworn financial disclosures, temporary sole physical custody of the minor child is awarded to Ms. Brennan pending the evidentiary hearing. Mr. Pierce will have supervised visitation only, to be arranged through the court. If authentication confirms what this memo appears to show, the court will refer the matter to the state's attorney for review. Daniel didn't move. His hands were still on the table. His face was the color of the courtroom walls. Carla closed her eyes, not dramatically, the way you close your eyes when the lights come on and you've been sitting in the dark too long. Jenna stood. She walked out of the gallery without looking at me. The door closed behind her with a soft click. Mike stayed. He stared at the floor. The judge called a recess. I held Eli's hand as we walked into the hallway. My blue thermos was in my other hand. Still full, still warm. Still wearing Ruth's sticker at both curling corners. Eli didn't ask what had happened. He didn't ask if he'd done something good or something bad. He just held my hand and walked. Daniel caught up to us near the elevator. His tie was loose now. His face was drawn. He looked 10 years older than the man who'd exhaled in satisfaction 20 minutes ago. He's a child, Daniel said. His voice was different, thinner, stripped of the rehearsed confidence Hollis had given him. He didn't know what he did. I looked at my ex-husband, the man who'd taught our son the word important. The man whose mother had left him at 12 and whose father had spent the next 27 years teaching him that love was a balance sheet. He brought a paper. Daniel, the truth was already in it. Daniel's jaw worked. I never wanted you broke. Yes, you did, I said. You just didn't want to know that's what you wanted. I turned toward the elevator. Eli waved at his father. A small wave. Fingers only, palms still. Daniel's hand went up halfway, then stopped. He didn't wave back. He stood in the hallway of the Stanford family court with his hands suspended at chest height, watching his son walk away in a yellow jacket. And I don't know what he saw. I hope it wasn't his mother. But I think it was. 6 weeks later, Diana Holcomb's forensic report landed on Caleb's desk. 2.7 million. Diana's original estimate had been conservative. The additional 300,000 was in a Delaware shell entity Daniel had set up the previous summer, routed through a trust account his father had established before he died. Diana traced every dollar, bank records, LLC operating agreements, partnership distributions that Daniel had classified as loans. At the evidentiary hearing, Rowe's memo was authenticated. His own office confirmed the signature under subpoena. The court ordered amended financial disclosures and retroactive child support recalculation. Daniel owed $184,000 in back payments based on his actual income. Sole legal and physical custody made permanent for me. Supervised visitation for Daniel, 4 hours per week with a court-appointed monitor until a psychological evaluation was completed. With the memo now authenticated, Judge Vaughn referred the matter to the state's attorney for perjury review, and Rowe was under state bar investigation. Hollis Greer Family Law quietly withdrew as Daniel's counsel. Their website removed his case from the notable representations page within the week. Carla stopped calling, stopped posting on Facebook, stopped sending LL Bean bags. Her name disappeared from the Guardian ad litem referral network after the Waverly conflict of interest surfaced in the forensic report's footnotes. Jenna sent me one text. "Sarah, I'm so sorry. I didn't open it. Not out of cruelty, out of triage. Some apologies are for the apologizer, and I was too busy unpacking boxes to perform gratitude for someone else's guilt." Mike filed for divorce 3 months later. That was his story, not mine. At home, the custody schedule on the fridge had new stickers. Eli had added a gold star to every weeknight and written underneath in green marker, "Mom Night." I bought a 2-bedroom condo in Norwalk that fall. Ruth's inheritance covered the down payment. Eli painted his room maple yellow, the same shade as the rain jacket, the same shade as the morning light in the kitchen where I'd taught him to tell the truth slow. Broke doesn't mean unfit. Rich doesn't mean right. And my 7-year-old brought a folded paper to a courtroom because I'd told him for years that he didn't need anyone's permission to be honest. Not even mine. That's my story. A rehearsed sentence, a folded paper, and a 7-year-old who trusted his own judgment. If you've ever been told you weren't enough because someone counted only what they could see, take that as your reminder today. You don't owe anyone the version of you they wrote. Share this with someone who needs to hear it.